relief yet. Does Diet Coke cause cancer? A new WHO report has left the soda struggling. Wagner is leaving Ukraine. Will Putin deploy Chechen's TikTok battalion to fight the war instead? And would you buy a bag that can hold nothing and that can only be seen under a microscope? Also, would you believe me if I said that someone paid more than $60,000 for it? What's our world without a little bit of crazy? The headlines first. As France burns, Macron rushes home from an EU summit. The French president calls for a crisis meeting amid violent protests. Hundreds arrested as riots continue for the third night over a policeman killing a teen. US approves the sale of ammunition to Taiwan. This is worth $440 million. It's the latest effort to boost Taiwan's defense in the face of Chinese aggression. Beijing says it firmly opposes Washington supplying weapons to the self-ruled island. Poland charges an arrested Russian ice hockey player with spying. They've not named the player, though. Kremlin slams Poland, accusing it of Russophobia. Ties between the two countries have reached an all-time low since the war in Ukraine began. Poland is one of Ukraine's staunchest allies. An Indian court rejects Twitter's lawsuit against the Modi government. Twitter had challenged the central government's order to block certain objectionable accounts. The Karnataka High Court has dismissed the Twitter plea and slapped a fine of $61,000. And another lawsuit against OpenAI. Two American authors have sued OpenAI over copyright infringement. They say the company mined data from their books to train ChatGPT. This has been a challenging month for Vladimir Putin. His grip on power has been tested. He faced a mutiny. It's been scotched now, but the damage is still being assessed. So Putin is trying to re-establish his authority, and guess where he's drawing inspiration from? India.
В Индии и премьер-министр, большой друг России, господин Моди, он целую концепцию выделил несколько лет назад. Сделано в Индии. Ну и, знаете, эффекты есть. Реальный эффект для индийской экономики ощутимый. Вот не грех повторять то, что запретено, если и не нами, то нашими друзьями, и хорошо работает.
That's right. Vladimir Putin called India a big friend. He hailed the Make in India initiative. And it's not the first time that he's praised India. But in this instance, the timing is significant because A, Prime Minister Modi has just returned from a state visit to the US, and B, Putin has just survived a coup attempt. It posed a threat not so much to his presidency, but his military establishment. It highlighted the differences within, the divide over the war in Ukraine and how they should be fighting it. So Putin is now trying to change the narrative, to seize control and to establish authority. And that statement about India is an attempt to do that. He's sending a signal both to the citizens of Russia and the world beyond. And what's he trying to say? Well, there are two parts to his message. First, the optics, and second, the intent. Putin was speaking at an event yesterday. It's called Strong Ideas for a New Time. Apparently, it's an annual affair. Now, before appearing at this event, he was in a region called Dagestan. He was seen mixing with the locals, taking selfies, even kissing a young girl on the head. It's a sharp contrast from the days of the pandemic when a long table separated Putin and his visitors. Yesterday, he was mixing with large crowds. In fact, in recent days, he has made a flurry of public appearances. At the Moscow event, Putin took to drawing. The Russian president drew a cartoon figure. Again, a very rare occurrence. Russian state TV has spread these videos far and wide. And earlier, they used to showcase Putin's tough macho image. Now they're trying to show the world his softer side. The idea is to show that he is a likable leader, that he enjoys mass support. So those were the optics. Now let's tell you about the intent. You see, after the coup, Putin wants to rally the masses behind him, so he's making a new pitch, a new message. And he's taking some inspiration from India. Self-reliance is his new clarion call. Let's in fact revisit Putin's statement about India. Make in India had a visible effect on the Indian economy. That's what he said. It is not a sin to adopt what's been invented by others. He chose his words carefully. He's openly saying that he wants to embrace the Make in India concept because it's effective. Putin says there is no sin in adopting an idea introduced by someone else. And Russia needs such a policy now more than ever. They're under multiple sanctions from the West. So far, they've limited the impact of these sanctions, and Russia's economy is doing better than expected. But how long can they sustain it? Russia's energy revenues have declined and declined sharply. Last month, they fell by almost 36%. And the result is this. Expenses are high, but revenues are falling. So there's a budget deficit. We're talking about a deficit of $42 billion. And this is in the first 4 months of the year. Moscow has to fix it. Hence the pitch to make in Russia. This is an endorsement of India's policies, also a nod to the India-Russia ties. It shows how much Putin values this relationship, and this is becoming a bit of a trend. World leaders of all descriptions trying to woo India. Last week, it was the US president who was courting India. Joe Biden raised a toast to Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
A toast to our partnership, to our people, to the possibilities that lie ahead. Two great friends, two great nations, and two great powers. Cheers.
According to Biden, India and the US are great friends. Well, the UK too wants to be friends with India. Look at this tweet from their Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He shared this last year after meeting with Prime Minister Modi. United by friendship. That's what he said about India. So every country of significance is trying to win India over. That's because it's a major economy, the world's fastest growing, a huge market and talent pool, and a geopolitical heavyweight. So while India refuses to confine itself to alliances or blocs, the world is keen to work with India and learn from it. But coming back to Russia, Putin has a big problem on his hands, the Wagner group. Russia's fighters turned mutineers. Their chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is in Belarus. His loyal fighters are following him, and this is part of the truce deal. Russia allowed Prigozhin to go to Belarus and gave the Wagner mercenaries 3 choices. Move to Belarus with Prigozhin, join the Russian armed forces, or just walk away from all of it. Looks like a lot of them have chosen their company over their country. Take a look at this. This is a military base in Belarus, just 90 kilometers away from the capital, Minsk. It was vacant until a few days ago, but now new facilities have come up there. The Wagner group is setting shop. To do what, you may ask? Well, no one is sure. But here's what we can tell you. They won't fight in Ukraine anymore. Russia says so. Prigozhin has refused to sign a contract with Russia's defense ministry. In fact, this is what may have triggered the mutiny in the first place.
A few days before this attempted mutiny, the Ministry of Defense announced that all formations that perform combat missions must sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. And everyone began to implement this decision, an absolutely correct decision. Everyone except Mr. Prigozhin. Then he was informed that in this case, Wagner will not take part in the special military operation. That is, no financing, no material resources will be allocated.
So Russia says Wagner is out of the Ukraine war. Prigozhin too says they won't fight the war anymore, and Ukraine seems to believe it. The head of military intelligence has said, and I'm quoting, the private military company, or PMC Wagner, will no longer take part in hostilities on the territory of Ukraine, and this is the most effective unit of the Russian Federation that knew how to achieve success at any cost. So Kiev too believes that Wagner is out of the picture. But their fighters haven't left the front lines yet. The US confirmed that yesterday.
What I would tell you is right now, we continue to see some elements of the Wagner group in Russian-occupied territory in Ukraine.
Ukraine says the Wagner forces are still there, but not fighting. They may be preparing to join Prigozhin or the Russian army. Either way, they're out of the war. Now remember, Ukraine says Wagner fighters were the most effective. They were instrumental in Russia's capture of the city of Bakhmut recently. And if you take a closer look, it does make sense. Wagner troops have been operating in foreign lands for years. They are veterans of conflicts in Syria, Libya, and a host of African nations. They're battle-hardened, unlike the conscripts that Russia drafted. So their loss will be felt unless a new group takes their place. And that group might be the Chechen Ahmad Special Forces. Now, first, a quick primer. Chechnya is a Russian territory in the Caucasian region. It is nominally under Russia, but mostly run as a private fiefdom by this man, Ramzan Kadyrov. He's a warlord with his own private army, much like Prigozhin with Wagner. Now, Kadyrov enjoys Putin's patronage, just like the Wagner chief once did. And when Prigozhin marched on Moscow, Kadyrov took action. He sent his Ahmad brigade to Rostov and Moscow. He also vehemently denounced the Wagner chief. Earlier this week, he held a meeting with Vladimir Putin. He posted this selfie to show that he's still in the president's good books. So was this meeting about taking over the Wagner group's responsibilities? Honestly, it's too soon to say, but there may be an issue here. You see, the Wagner group was feared for its effectiveness. But the Chechen fighters do not enjoy that reputation. In fact, they're called the TikTok brigade. They post music videos on TikTok. They have a reputation for being all talk and no work, and not without reason. When the war began last year, these TikTok fighters were on the front lines. They marched towards Kiev in the initial assault, but they reportedly suffered heavy casualties. So their commander, Ramzan Kadyrov, decided to pull them out. And the Ahmad brigade has been on the sidelines since. Even during the Wagner mutiny, they weren't really useful. Yes, they entered Rostov, but they apparently did not fire a single bullet at the Wagner troops. And they reached Moscow only after the mutiny was aborted. You know what they did then? They released a video claiming that they were on their way to fight. But the Wagner troops had already withdrawn by then. And stunts like these make the Ahmad battalion look like a non-serious force. But they do have one thing in common with the Wagner troops: a reputation for brutality. So far, they've shown it only in Chechnya. They've carried out vicious crackdowns on Kadyrov's opponents. But on the front lines, you need more than brutality. So can these Chechen fighters replace the Wagner group? And is that what Moscow has planned? We'll keep you posted. Some things are unavoidable, like taxes after income, or aging in life, or controversies after defense deals. And trust me, the last one is unavoidable too. There could be multiple concerns, sometimes over quality, sometimes over quantity, and always over cost. The latest drone deal between India and the US is one such case. We've told you about this one. India is all set to buy 31 drones from the United States. They're manufactured by General Atomic. They're called the MQ-9B drones. And what's the price tag? Multiple reports mention $3.5 billion. That's $3.5 billion for 31 drones. Now, we did the math. If you go with this figure of $3.5 billion, it comes to around $112 million per drone, or 900 crore rupees per drone. Is that too high? Well, India's opposition parties say it is. The Congress party claims the government is overpaying, and that too around 4 times more. And such claims have been making the rounds since last week. That's when Prime Minister Modi visited the US. That's also when the deal was announced. Earlier this week, the Defense Ministry issued a clarification. It said the price and other terms are yet to be finalized. In other words, do not jump the gun. Wait for the deal to be actually signed. But yesterday, another report emerged. This one quoted official sources in the Indian government. And what does it say? That India is set to strike a major bargain and the drones could be sold at 27% less than what other countries paid. So you've got 3 different versions. The opposition says we're overpaying. The government says the price is not decided yet. And unnamed sources say we're getting a bargain. So which one is it? Honestly, we'll have to wait this out. Only an official agreement can answer this question. In the meantime, let me tell you something about defense deals. It's not straightforward at all. There are many factors which decide the final price, like what extra features you want. Are you also getting technology transfer? Is there a local production plan? Think of it like your online food order. The sticker price may be $20, but your checkout price could be much higher. Maybe you added an extra sauce. Or maybe there's extra delivery fee because you live far away. All of this contributes to the final price. And defense deals are very similar, except multiplied by millions. Take this MQ-9B drone, which India is buying from the US. Official sources say the deal could be struck for $3 billion. If so, then it's $99 million per drone. Now, the UAE has bought the same drone. They purchased 18 drones for $2.9 billion. Do the math. It's $165 million per drone. Australia also has this drone on their wish list. A deal was struck for $980 million, 12 drones for $980 million. That works out to $80 million per drone. The deal fell through, perhaps because of the rate. Then you have Britain. They bought 16 drones at $69 million per aircraft. Do you see the difference in rates? The UAE paid $165 million, Australia was set to pay $80, Britain paid only $69. And this is how defense deals work. Your final cost depends on your requirements. The UK, for example, did not buy sensors or weapons. They just wanted a small radar. But India's package is more extensive. It includes sensors, weapons, and anti-submarine capabilities. So naturally, it will be more expensive. And this applies to all military equipment. Take the Patriot missiles, for example. They're lethal surface-to-air weapons produced by the US. The average cost of a missile is $4 million. Guess how much Saudi Arabia paid for it? $10 million per missile. The Netherlands also bought the same ones. They paid around $12.5 million per missile. Another example is the S-400 missiles. India bought 5 systems from Russia. We paid around $1 billion per system. Turkey bought the same equipment. They paid $3 billion for 2. So $500 million more per missile system. That's what Ankara paid. My point is, cost differs. If you add sensors or radars or weapons, the product will become more expensive. That's also what happened with the Rafales. On paper, the planes became more expensive, but the package was different too. Could the MQ-9 be a similar case? We say it's best to not jump the gun, wait for the official word, but even then, it's tough to compare rates. These are strategic purchases after all. You can't just list out in newspapers what features you've bought. That's like advertising your strengths to your enemy. The bottom line is this: comparing such purchases is best left to experts, to auditors, to veterans and arms dealers. Because you may think you're comparing apples to apples, but unless you bite into it, you never know. Well, same is the case with Pakistan. You really don't know what you're getting into until it finally happens. The bailout we've been telling you about, well, it has happened at the very last minute. The IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, will give Pakistan $3 billion. This is the money they froze for the past 8 months. They will finally release it and save Pakistan from collapse. The country is going through its worst economic crisis, the worst ever. There is chronic shortage of foreign exchange. Pakistan was as good as broke. They barely had the money to cover 1 month of imports. Inflation rose to 38%, which is a record high. Debt payments are due. Pakistan has to pay $25 billion this year alone. But pay from where? There is no money. So the IMF bailout will give a breather. Also a place in history books. I'll tell you what. This is bailout number 23. Pakistan has got 23 bailouts in its 75-year history. This is the highest in the world. So they come with experience. And they follow a predictable pattern. An endless boom-to-bust cycle. They show some growth for a few years, then they hit a crisis. The economy teeters, they appeal for aid, and they get a bailout. This repeats over and over again. Let me quote from a former World Bank advisor based in Islamabad. His name is Abid Hassan. And this is what he said: over the last 3 decades, IMF assistance has not been able to bring about tangible reforms. IMF programs have just been more of a band-aid. And band-aids are not a cure. They just stop the bleeding for a while. Pakistan's disease is political. It is infected by its military. They keep looting the country. They keep ruining its economy and punishing its people. And then they ask the international community to pay the bill. But why does the world pay? Because the bailout money is nothing compared to the price we'll have to pay if a nuclear rogue state goes bust, if it descends into complete chaos. And Pakistan knows this. So it keeps coming back for more money. Even the current bailout won't solve its problems. And there are many. For starters, there's political instability. The days of the current government, the Sharif government, are numbered. Their term expires in August. The next election should happen in October, but you can't be sure of that. Imran Khan is waiting in the wings, preparing to unleash chaos if he is denied power. He still enjoys mass support. He's openly challenging the military. They tried to jail him. They slapped military trials on his supporters, who ran riot last month. They broke into military installations and ransacked the official residence of a commander. The army calls this mass uprising a conspiracy.
The tragedy on the 9th of May was a huge conspiracy against Pakistan, and this is a conspiracy that we need to understand.
And there's chaos in the military too. Recently, they fired 3 top officers and disciplined 15 senior officers. That's the term they use, disciplined. They've been accused of not doing enough to secure military installations. Experts say this crackdown is a message, and of course it's rare. It's a message to the sympathizers of Imran Khan that support for him will not be tolerated, and if there are signs of dissent, the military will come down hard. Then there's chaos at the borders. The Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Just this month, a security checkpoint was attacked. This happened in northwest Pakistan. 3 Pakistani soldiers died. Do you know who was behind this? The Tehreek-e-Taliban, or TTP. They have intensified attacks on the Pakistani army. At the border, the Taliban regime has given shelter to the TTP, the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. They're sheltering these people. And this has allowed the group to attack Pakistani forces. So there's political uncertainty, there's internal instability, there's volatility at the border, and you have an economic mess. Pakistan has committed to a reform plan. Well, they had to get the IMF bailout. But will they walk the talk? Will they implement these reforms? The record is not inspiring. They may have got a bailout, but that is no guarantee to the end of pain. Vantage continues after a short break.
संविधान बनाने के बाद हमने बहुत सारे प्रिविलेजेस, बहुत सारे अधिकार अलग अलग सामाजिक ग्रुपों को दिए हैं, जैसे आरक्षण का है, दूसरे अधिकार हैं, उन पर ये देश का सारे देश के एक कानून का कोई असर उन पर तो नहीं पड़ेगा। उसको वे करना, उसको तौलना बहुत आवश्यक है, उसकी मीमांसा करना आवश्यक है। कल आपने बना दिया, पता चला लिटिगेशन का और दरवाजा खुल गया। पहले से ही आरक्षण पर कई तरीके के
Does age bring wisdom? Look at some old people around you and you may get the answer. Oldest doesn't always mean wisest. Just like the United States of America, it's the oldest democracy in the world. It's like that old man who keeps advising everyone else. But what about his own affairs? Let's put American democracy under the scanner. Let's ask that uncomfortable question. Is the US a backsliding democracy? And today is a perfect day for this conversation because yesterday the US Supreme Court gave a historic verdict. It struck down affirmative action in colleges. Now, what does that mean? What is affirmative action? It is used to give greater opportunities to certain groups. The criteria can be different. It can be gender, race, even religion. In most cases, it takes the form of quotas, reservation. Suppose a community or group has been historically underrepresented. They will get quotas for jobs and education. This is affirmative action in a nutshell. In India, it is done on the basis of caste and religion. In the US, it was done on the basis of race. Since the 1960s, colleges had quotas for African Americans. The idea was to increase diversity. But recently, there has been a backlash. The argument is that quotas violate the principle of equality. So the matter reached the Supreme Court. 6 judges voted to strike down affirmative action. 3 judges voted against. Needless to say, there is a lot of criticism. President Joe Biden says he's severely disappointed.
You know, I know today's court decision is a severe disappointment to so many people, including me. But we cannot let the decision be a permanent setback for the country. We need to keep an open door of opportunities.
President Biden, the Congressional Black Caucus said the Supreme Court has thrown into question its own legitimacy. Is this a rogue court?
This is not a normal court.
His Republican rival is happy, though. Donald Trump says it's a great day for America. Tells us how divided this country is. One group says this verdict will lead to segregation, that only rich white people will attend these colleges. The other side says about time.
When I heard Judge Scalia suggests that maybe blacks do better at schools that are not as fast as UT. I didn't know if I was in the courtroom at the United States Supreme Court or at a Donald Trump rally.
You cannot cure racial discrimination that occurred in the past with new discrimination today. Race and ethnicity have no place in American life and law.
Now, there are two parts to this story. One is obviously the quota system. The second is the backsliding of the US democracy. Let's briefly dwell on the first one. It's a debate that keeps popping up in India as well. We have reservation based on caste and religion in India, and every now and then there are calls to abolish this system. But for the moment, we'll focus on the US. They began affirmative action in the 1960s. Have things improved since then? Let's look at the numbers. Here's a study from 2017. It found that around 9% of freshmen at Ivy League colleges were black. Now, Ivy League is a group of top American colleges. Only 9% of their new admissions were black in 2017. At the same time, black people made up 15% of college-age American population. So the gap is around 6 points. And what was this gap in 1980? The same. So what has 50 years of affirmative action produced? I'm sure there are individual success stories and more power to them. But on a larger level, there is no improvement. Now, I know what some people would say. Doesn't that mean we should continue with the system until there is change? Well, look at the other side. It hasn't delivered in 50 years. Why would it deliver in the next 50? And I'm not saying that scrapping quotas overnight was right. I'm saying a rethink was needed. The US Supreme Court had political reasons for doing so. After all, it is a conservative court. But beyond that, there is a need to ask these questions. In the US, in India, everywhere, do quotas really help? Think about it. Now to the second part of our story. What is happening to US democracy? This court ruling should not be seen in isolation. Think of what's been happening in the last 6 or 7 years. First, they banned tourists from Muslim countries, classic Islamophobia. Then they separated children from migrant families at the border. Even dictators would flinch. In 2021, the crowning achievement, one of the most botched up transfers of power in democratic history anywhere in the world. I'm sure you remember these pictures. Thousands of people stormed the US Capitol. They desecrated both chambers of Congress. They wanted to reinstate Donald Trump as president, even though he lost the election. That did not stop them. Then last year, there was another jolt. The Supreme Court struck down abortion rights. In one blow, women lost control of their bodies. Only 3 countries have curbed abortion since the 1990s, and the United States of America is one of them. And don't think this is a domestic industry. Washington also exports democratic backsliding. The best example is Afghanistan. America's messed up withdrawal brought the Taliban back to power. The people lost democracy. The women lost their freedoms. If this isn't a backsliding democracy, then what is? Hate crimes are up 12%. Former presidents are being charged with crimes. The sitting president's son is pleading guilty to tax evasion. Yet America doesn't care. They still call themselves the beacon of democracy. And I know what some people will say. Take Donald Trump out and half the problems disappear. Perhaps it's true. But Donald Trump is not some anomaly. Donald Trump is a product of America's faulty democracy. So Washington cannot hide behind the Democrats versus Republicans argument. It cannot blame Donald Trump for everything. It must admit that there is something rotten at the core. Do Biden and company have the guts to do that? To acknowledge that America is indeed a backsliding democracy? Well, from recent experience, I don't think so. In geopolitics, positions evolve. Your interests of today are not your interests of tomorrow. Case in point, a recent joint statement by India and the Philippines. But first, some context. The Filipino foreign minister is in New Delhi. He held talks with S. Jaishankar on Thursday. Then they issued a joint statement. Let me quote from it and listen to this carefully. The ministers underlined the need for a peaceful settlement of disputes and for an adherence to international law, especially the UNCLOS and the 2016 arbitral award on the South China Sea. Again, some context. UNCLOS is the United Nations Convention on Laws of the Seas, UNCLOS. Basically, it sets maritime rules. In 2016, they ruled on Beijing's claims over the South China Sea. Now, if you ask China, 90% of the sea belongs to them. But the UN rejected that claim. It asked China to stop activities near Filipino waters. Now, in 2016, India's reaction was cautious, the usual stuff. We take note of the verdict, we support freedom of navigation, all parties must respect UNCLOS, very diplomatic and very careful. But you know what was missing? India's statement did not ask China to adhere to the verdict. Cut to 2023, the language has changed. New Delhi wants China to accept and implement the 2016 decision. There is no ambiguity anymore. So the question is, what has changed? Well, relations with China have nosedived since 2016. Both countries are locked in a border standoff. China is not interested in peaceful coexistence. So what should India do? Reach out to other countries in a similar situation. The ASEAN members fit the bill. 4 of them have maritime disputes with China. Plus, they're interested in Indian weapons. This week, India gifted an active duty warship to Vietnam. Talks are also underway for the BrahMos missile. The Philippines has already bought them. Delivery is expected to start by December. It's a really well-rounded relationship. India and Southeast Asia share cultural and historical ties. They have a similar colonial past. They have a free trade agreement in place, and now they also have a common rival, China. For New Delhi, this is uncharted waters, though. Yes, India has always called for a free and open Indo-Pacific, but South China Sea is the Western Pacific. It is not India's traditional sphere of influence. Though of late, India has been focusing more on this region. In the month of May, the Indian Navy held joint drills with ASEAN states. It was the first such Indian exercise with the bloc. The Navy chief was himself in Singapore to flag it off. Tells you how serious New Delhi is. America's top diplomat for East Asia was asked about India's role in this region, and he said he wants more India-US cooperation. He also sees India playing a greater role in the South China Sea. But what's in it for New Delhi? Well, for starters, it keeps China occupied, sort of like a second front other than the Himalayas. And secondly, opportunities. We keep talking about looking and acting east, but the true potential is still untapped. India is only the 8th biggest trading partner for ASEAN. China is the biggest, and this could be a chance to improve that. After all, both sides find themselves in the same equation. Their trade with China keeps growing, but their relations with China keep deteriorating. So maybe it's time to write a new equation, one without China. Also, the defense deals. Southeast Asia is spending $43 billion on defense. American weapons are too expensive for them. Russia is too busy. China is their adversary. So what options do they have? A handful of countries, including India and South Korea. And both these countries, India and South Korea, are making efficient and affordable arms. Politically, this is a big shift for India. It's not reacting to China's power games. It is taking the power games to China.
Cheers.
We saw evidence of this last week in the United States. Prime Minister Modi talked about coercion in the Indo-Pacific. It was a clear reference to China. And now India is openly backing the Philippines against Beijing. These are signs of a more assertive policy. It doesn't yet make India a major power in the Western Pacific, but it certainly signals that intent. And now let's talk about a new milestone for space. Another company has completed its first commercial space flight. This is Virgin Galactic. It is part of billionaire Richard Branson's Virgin Empire. This project has been on for some 20 years. They've finally been able to take paying customers to space. Virgin Galactic has joined the ranks of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. So now there's another avenue for the ultra-rich to blow their money, which is actually what the story is about. The millionaires and billionaires doing extreme things just because they can, from enjoying the view at the edge of space to dangerous voyages to the ruins of the Titanic. The ultra-rich are looking for things to spend on, and new industries keep popping up to fulfill their whims and fancies. Here's our report.
That plane taking off marked a milestone in the space tourism industry. Virgin Galactic has finally found its wings. Richard Branson's firm is now open for business, and what a business it is. The people who were part of the Galactic 01 mission got to visit space. The mission spacecraft had 2 parts, a giant plane called Eve and the smaller space shuttle called the VSS Unity. It's on this shuttle that 3 people took a commercial flight to space. They were Colonel Walter Villade and Lieutenant Colonel Angelo Landolfi from the Italian Air Force and Pantaleone Carlucci of the National Research Council of Italy.
Much better than expected. It was a beautiful ride. It was actually very beautiful since the very beginning. Even climbing up with Eve next to us
was unbelievable. The acceleration, the climb, and suddenly the microgravity. And I was concentrated with my test with my kneeboard, but I had the opportunity to look outside and the view. It was amazing, fantastic. So speechless about that.
Looking at the roster, you may think they were members of an Italian research crew. That isn't the case, even though they did perform experiments in space. No, they were actually commercial passengers who were lucky enough to have their tickets sponsored. And they have become the first Virgin Galactic space tourists. The next Virgin space flight, the Galactic 02, is scheduled to take off in early August. And that will likely have regular people as part of the crew. Well, regular ultra-rich people, that is. Because you see, that's who the Virgin Galactic business caters to. A ticket is reportedly worth $450,000. This is for just a few minutes at the edge of space, barely beyond the atmosphere. But the journey is already booked out for months. It seems millionaires and billionaires really do want to leave everyone else behind. Now don't get us wrong. This isn't a case of sour grapes. We believe that those with the means should do whatever they want, as long as they pay the fair price. Because think about it, don't we keep hearing how we should take the bus instead of our car, or opt for trains instead of flights? Basically, how we should do our part to protect the environment. But meanwhile, the ultra-wealthy get on their private jets and leave a trail of pollution in their wake. Look at the Virgin Galactic spaceflight again. The thrusters generating enough power to breach the atmosphere. How much more damaging is that for the environment than your humble car? Is enough of the cost of the spaceflight ticket going into mitigating the environmental damage? Or is it one rule for us and another for the ultra-wealthy? Now, you may argue that private endeavors like this, paid for by the rich, can benefit us in the long run. To that, we point to the recent Titan submersible disaster. The vessel was created to let the rich visit the ruins of the Titanic, while they played video games. Seriously? That's supposed to lead to new scientific discoveries? That trip ended in disaster when the submersible imploded. Reportedly because it didn't follow safety standards. The CEO of OceanGate, the company behind the trip, made a revelation. He said carbon fiber that was part of the vessel's hull wasn't certified to carry passengers to the depths of the Titanic, and as a result, the passengers paid the price. A rush to develop absurdly expensive tourist activities for the ultra-wealthy is probably not the best thing, neither for the environment nor the passengers' safety. Perhaps these dangerous, expensive activities are best left to the scientific professionals and not bored billionaires.
Before I begin the next story, let me ask you a question. What do former US Presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton have in common? Yes, they've both been impeached. Drowned in corruption probes, with lies, cover-ups, pardons, and payoffs, and adultery. But do you know what else they share in common? Their love for Diet Coke. Yes, the sugar-free, low-calorie soft drink produced by the Coca-Cola Company. It saw a heady ascent in the 90s. The world swooned towards the drink's aisles, looking for this fizzy elixir that promised to help its patrons shed a few extra kilos. But today, the soda is struggling. Sales have declined every year since 2006. There's hatred from the nutrition community and dejection from governments. Yet many continue to guzzle one can after the other. But now their hopes seem to have gone completely flat because Diet Coke may be causing cancer. And this is according to the World Health Organization. Its cancer research arm reviewed aspartame. It's a white, odorless powder, a low-calorie artificial sweetener. It is added to Diet Coke. It is the very ingredient that makes the soda sugar-free. But for the first time, it is set to be declared a possible cancer risk to humans. A report will be published next month, with the WHO labeling the sweetener, quote-unquote, possibly carcinogenic to humans. This means there is some evidence linking it to cancer. And this news has already spread like wildfire, prompting widespread angst and collective gasps from Diet Coke lovers, but also affirmative nods from those who never believed the soda was healthy.
I'm kind of addicted to Diet Coke a bit, and that's going to make me maybe want to think about changing to like flavored sparkling water, maybe that's not got any sugar or aspartame in it.
I'm surprised it took this long. That was like 40 years or something for them to finally come out with it. You know, but I'm sure they knew it a long time ago.
While the news of death by Diet Coke is making waves, I should tell you that this is not the only product that uses aspartame. The sweetener has been widely used since the 1980s. It is on restaurant tables, in our home kitchens, and our fizzy drinks, chewing gums, cereals, and even cough drops. All in all, it's almost everywhere. It has been authorized for use globally by regulators. It has been defended by food and beverage makers. But the WHO report may change all of that. It may force a shift, especially for food companies.
Aspartame, it tastes a lot like sugar, and it's also really convenient for front of package labeling to say, hey, this is a no added sugar product. It's convenient for companies to kind of construct what we call a health halo around some of these products. Unfortunately, in this case, as you dig a little deeper, you realize that sometimes something like a diet soda might not quite be the health food that we might have hoped.
You know, the consumer taste is a very, very difficult thing to get right. So the fact that they already have it right, that's why they're reluctant to change, but they're going to have to.
Companies will have to change, but so will consumers. Even though right now many of them are riddled with confusion because this news contradicts what the world has believed so far.
It seems like everything causes cancer these days, you know, so I kind of take it with a grain of salt. I don't think I'm going to give up Diet Coke completely.
The thing is, nutrition research is constantly evolving. With new studies, long-held facts are deemed lukewarm assumptions.
Really, anytime an organization like the World Health Organization changes guidance, it really just causes people to question, okay, like what can I trust anymore if things are constantly changing? I would encourage people just realize that, hey, this is the way science works sometimes, but also as much as possible realize that there are consistent eating patterns that have been shown over and over again to be risk-free.
The fact of the matter is, a little bit of confusion is better than not knowing if something causes cancer. Remember when cigarettes were sold as something healthy? Maybe this is a case of déjà vu with a sweetener too. And experts say cutting down is the way to go.
Certainly cutting down on it is a great place to start. It's really incredible once you start removing things from your diet. It can be a little bit of a challenge at first, but people's tastes do change.
And this change in taste seems necessary. For decades, aspartame has served as a miracle of modern science. It let us have our cake and eat it too. But now maybe it's time to face the bitter truth. It seems like fashion is done being wearable. So now it's just being weird. It's tired of finding fresh grist for its mill, so fashion is elevating fugitive passions to the status of high-end brands. Like making a bag suited for ants. An art collective called Mischief is world famous for its controversial designs, and now it has created a bag that's less than 0.03 inches wide. 0.03 inches. Yes, it's a microscopic bag. It's smaller than a grain of salt, barely visible to the human eye, and now it's been sold for more than $60,000. Makes you wonder, what's the point of this? Here's a report.
You don't need to be interested in handbags to have heard of the Hermes Birkin or the Chanel flap bag. And now, the microscopic bag has got everyone talking. It may have grabbed the world's attention, but are you unable to see it? Well, you aren't alone. No one can, really. At least not without a microscope. That's why it's literally called the microscopic bag. It's an itty-bitty, teeny-tiny work of fashion designed using a 3D printer. and modelled after Louis Vuitton's famous tote. It is less than 0.03 inches wide, smaller than a grain of salt, no bigger than a speck of dust. And yet, it has been sold for $63,750. Yes, over $60,000 for a bag you can't even see. What's next? $1 million for an invisible dress? Who knows? But the sale of this bag is not too shocking. After all, this isn't the first rodeo for mischief. The New York-based art collective, which is known for such inventive projects, it recently designed the big red boots. They too went viral for looking so cartoonish. The collective also launched sneakers with blood on them. And as amusing as this is not the only brand bringing jarring and unorthodox aesthetics to the fore. Look at this outfit. It's called a t-shirt shirt because it's literally just that. A shirt stitched on top of a t-shirt. Designed by luxury fashion house Balenciaga. Can you guess how much it costs? About $1,300. This brand has a couple of other such innovations. Like tote bag with a built-in glove, costing over $4,000. Blanket bags worth $3,000. And Lay's chip bag clutch worth $1,800. But again, many other brands are playing this odd game, like Gucci that launched grass-stained pair of jeans worth $1,200. Moschino's baguette bag costing over $1,000 and its $700 plastic dry cleaning bag dress. Seriously, what is going on? And are we the only ones confused about this? Clearly not. Because the world seems to be divided over such trends. Now, fashion is art, and it is allowed to be bizarre, bombastic, and straight up uneasy. And to many, owning such items is not a silly investment. They don't view the microscopic bag as a wearable accessory. For starters, it really isn't wearable, unless the buyer is an ant. But patrons of such fashion view the bag as an art piece, a commentary on luxury bags, a showcase of how people will go to extreme ends to own them. And that clearly seems to be the case. After all, someone did pay a bomb for this minuscule artwork, bag, oddity, whatever you may call it. But to most of the world, it really seems like fashion is being desperate with such trends. Being hungry for new ideas, and not only that, also aching for the next generation of designers who can captivate the audience and create big. That is not only money-making, but also exciting, even if it is incredibly tiny. At this point, it seems like fashion has no choice but to take a leap of faith and look uneasily into the future while often suffering a crisis of faith itself. Because after the microscopic bag, it's hard to tell if rule-breaking designers are steering fashion towards the light or pushing it into a trendy, frenzy-filled abyss.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. French riots continue to spread in the third night of unrest. Over a policeman killing a teenager, the rioters hurled fireworks and tried to loot a Nike store as fire raged at a construction site of an Olympic swimming pool. Clashes erupted in India's Manipur state again after 2 people were shot dead. Virgin Galactic completed its first commercial flight. We told you about it. They took an Italian crew with over 50 miles above the Earth. And finally, what makes the 30th of June significant? We're taking you back to the year 1997 when Hong Kong was handed over to China, ending 156 years of British rule. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching.
पर वो विषय तो है,
लेकिन देश की सीमाओं में चीन वो है,
ये विषय, ये जस्ट बिकॉज देयर आर अदर इश्यूज,
कुछ लोग मालदार होते जा
रहे हैं। हरीश जी, but just because there are other issues, that doesn't mean that you will not address some of the core issues which are enshrined even in our constitution. Directive principles of state policy में आर्टिकल 44 में ये लिखा है कि state must secure a uniform civil code for its citizens. और मैं मानता हूं कि कांग्रेस पार्टी has not taken a position on it yet. बट आपको क्या लगता है, देश में कॉमन सिविल कोड होना चाहिए कि नहीं? आपका निजी ओपिनियन, व्हाट्स योर पर्सनल ओपिनियन सर?
जी, इस पर आप कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली की डिबेट देखिए, बड़े डिटेल में बातचीत हुई है। और अनुत्तरत्वा जो है, जब ये हुआ नहीं, ऐसा संभव नहीं है अभी, क्योंकि देश के सामने और बहुत सारे हालात है। जब सुटेबल समय आएगा तो नेहरू जी ने आयरिश कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का हवाला दे करके कहा आयरलैंड के कि नहीं, जो है हम अपने वहाँ एक गाइडिंग प्रिंसिपल ऑफ स्टेट पॉलिसी बनाते हैं और उसके तहत जो है इनको सम्मिलित करवाते हैं। तब आर्टिकल 44 का समावेश करवाया गया, उसमें प्रोविजन किया गया। तो ये नेहरू जी के और अम्बेडकर जी की सादी बुद्धिमत्ता का परिणाम था। तो इसका अर्थ है, हमारे संविधान निर्माता जो फ्रीडम फाइटर वो थे, उस समय के लोग थे, वो भी इसकी आवश्यकता को महसूस करते थे और हमने कभी इसकी आवश्यकता को वो नहीं किया। मगर उसके लिए एक प्रॉपर टाइम होता है, समय होता है, सहमतियां होती हैं। आप इस देश को लोकतंत्र है क्या? मैं कह रहा हूँ असहमति भी है, तब तो मिनिमम सहमति किस बात में हो सकती है, उससे लेजिस्लेशन बनाए जाते हैं। तो ये तो ऐसा हो रहा है, तू या तो मेरी बात मान, नहीं तो मैं तेरी नाक काट देता हूँ।
नहीं, पर ऐसा भी तो नहीं। पर आपको लगता है कि 70 साल बाद भी माहौल नहीं बना है? 70 साल बाद भी भारत इसके लिए तैयार नहीं है, यूसीसी के लिए?
बहुत सारे सवालात रहे होंगे। और यदि आज आप समझते हैं, आप गवर्नमेंट ऑफ द डे हैं, आप समझते हैं कि आज समय आ गया है, इस पर विचार होना चाहिए। पहले तो ये था 2-1 साल पहले जगते आप, चलिए आप अब भी जगह हैं तो आप आम सहमति बनाइए, काहे के लिए?
Very warm welcome. You're watching Breaking on News 18 with me, Akanksha Swaroop. Let's quickly bring you some breaking inputs as far as Chidambaram Temple is concerned. We're now learning that a legal notice has been sent to the Tamil Nadu Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Minister Sekhar Babu on behalf of a devotee named Ashish Kumar. This legal notice calls this act by the HRNCE officials as an illegal act. The notice seeks restraint of all the concerned officials of HRNCE from infringing upon the rights of the temple trust. Remember, priests of this landmark Chidambaram temple were caught in a tussle with the Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Department after the priests banned the entry of devotees into the shrine for 4 days, citing security reasons. For more details, let's quickly go across to Purnima. Purnima, could you take us through what this legal notice states?
Well, a devotee of Chidambaram Natarajan Temple has now, in fact, sent a legal notice to the HRNC department as well as Minister Shekhar Babu. And in that notice, he says that officials have illegally tried to enter the temple premises, and that is illegal. They are not supposed to do that, and they have no power to take over the control of the temple. This is something that the notice said. Remember, last week controversy erupted when the HRNC officials, along with the police officers, had tried to enter the holy space that was closed for devotees from 24 to 27. And what followed was they tried to take the devotees, and in fact, couple broke out, and later 11 priests were booked, or Dikshitars were booked. And this, following this, a notice has been sent to the minister and said that such actions are uncalled for, and they are not allowed to take control of the temple or the management or the functioning of the temple.
All right, many thanks to you, Purnima Murli, for bringing in those latest inputs. And with that, let's bring you some very disturbing news coming in from the national capital. A man drowned to death. We are learning that this death took place due to waterlogging in the national capital. The deceased has been identified as Ajit Sharma. His auto rickshaw was found stuck in the ditch. He had driven over the ditch accidentally without realizing that it was deep. For more details, I'm joined in by our correspondent Anshul Singh. Anshul, whether it is death due to electrocution or even waterlogging, monsoon is becoming a very dangerous period for all those living in the national capital. Take us through what exactly led to this death.
Very rightly mentioned, Akansha. This is not waterlogging that has happened due to monsoon, but this is pre-monsoon showers that have been happening in the national capital. And this is the third death that we have seen happening in the national capital itself due to pre-monsoon showers that have been happening out here. So this incident that happened today itself, he was a auto driver, and as soon as he went inside a constructing bridge, there was a massive ditch that was over there, and there was no indication that there can be a ditch available over there. And as soon as he reached over there, he got stuck into that ditch and he lost his life. So this is the third incident that we have already seen that there have been two people who have already lost their life due to electrocution in the national capital itself. And now this is the third death that has happened due to waterlogging. This is absolutely a shocking incident that has come up from the national capital. However, the Delhi police has visited an FIR in this entire matter, and they are investigating the case, and they'll make sure that whoever the person is responsible, he'll get punished. But yeah, this is a very, very shocking incident that has come up, and it remains to be seen if at all the police will be able to find the exact person who was responsible for not putting up that sign, or probably not making sure that people do not enter that area once there is such heavy rains in the national capital still.
Absolutely. Also raises the question if the Delhi government is adequately braced up to handle this kind of monsoon. What is the preparedness also is the question to be asked. Many thanks to you, Anshul, for bringing in those inputs. And with that, let's now shift focus over to breaking inputs coming in from West Bengal. Just ahead of the Panchayat polls in West Bengal, we are now learning that Governor Ananda Bose has set up a helpline number where he listens to the problems of those people in distress and has asked the State Election Commission to take necessary steps. For more details, let's quickly go across to our correspondent Kamalika, who's joining me on the phone line. Kamalika, what explains the decision of the governor to set up this kind of helpline? We do believe that he will, of course, be receiving information which is unfiltered. That is usually the case in formal reports. What was the decision? What explains the decision?
See, he started off with a peace room, and since he himself is traveling in various areas, and now presently is in North Bengal, so what we are getting it from the sources, he decided that the peace room and this work cannot stop. So he himself started off with this mobile rapid action force system where you can see, it's just like a film, you can see that his OSD is receiving a call, a distress call. Then he is passing over to the governor, and the governor is talking to the victim. And then we see that the governor is calling up the State Election Commissioner, the Chief Secretary. So it is a very rapid action system which he has set. But obviously this will not put the ruling party, the ruling party will not be happy with this. because the governor is really doing something which is very different, and definitely this will put various questions also.
Absolutely, and that is what brings me to my next question. Has the Trinamool Congress reacted so far as the governor's decision is concerned?
Well, they are not at all liking what he is doing in this way. They're just saying that the governor is trying to work as an agent of BJP, as an agent of RSS. That's what they have been saying. And they are in their stand that this is something which the government is doing. That their point is the State Election Commission is doing what they can do. Central forces are coming. So what was the requirement of the governor to do it? But on the other hand, governor is trying to show something different that is very clearly, that's evident from the visuals.
All right. Many thanks to you, Kamalika Sengupta, for bringing in all those latest inputs. And with that, let's shift focus over to the state of Uttar Pradesh. A significant message has been sent from the state government to the mafia raj in the state. The keys of 76 affordable housing units constructed on land that was reclaimed from killed gangster Atiq Ahmed has been given to the poor by Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath. The housing units were constructed under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana scheme, and the state deputy CM KP Maurya has hit out at the Samajwadi Party, saying that the SP government is famous for illegal occupation of land, while the BJP government is famous for giving accommodation to the poor.
कि कुख्यात माफियाओं के कब्जे से मुक्त कराई गई भूमि पर प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना के अंतर्गत 76 परिवार